Well, hello there. Welcome to the episode. Today we are chatting about stress, and I'm going to be sure to make this episode super clear, concrete, and most importantly, actionable. Because I find that when stress is talked about, it tends to be so general and non-specific that you're just sort of left wondering like, okay, I understand that high stress isn't great, but what do I actually do about it? And so we're going to remedy that today. We're going to cover the different types of stress as well as specific actions that you can take right now in each and every category in order to better manage your life, essentially. So first of all, what are the different types of stress? Big picture, we have physiological and psychological stressors. However, that is still just way too broad. And also, physiological and psychological stressors bleed into one another so much that we simply need to get more granular. So let's do that. The stress categories are nutrition, movement, sleep, substances, and what we will call life. So first up, let's delve into nutritional stressors. Carrying around excess body fat is a massive stressor. So is actually not having enough body fat. However, that is so rare nowadays given our modern food environment that it's essentially irrelevant to 99.9% of folks. Eating a low nutrient density diet is also a huge stressor because our bodies have specific nutritional needs, and if we don't meet those needs, that is stressful. So we can actually be overweight and yet undernourished, which is kind of wild to think about. But if someone is eating a heavily ultra-processed food diet, they are likely getting plenty of calories, too many in fact, but very few nutrients. So in order to set ourselves up for success nutrition-wise, we need to be of a healthful body composition, and we need to be eating plenty of high-quality, nutrient-dense foods. On a broad scale, examples of said foods are meat, fish, seafood, eggs, dairy, fruit, and veggies. You can totally include some grains, nuts, beans, legumes, etc. And the one major caveat here is that no matter what you choose to eat from these categories, digestion and elimination must be on point, because poor digestion is a gigantic stressor. And so even if a food is labeled quote unquote healthy, if it throws off your digestion and elimination, it is not healthy for you, at least right now. A few other signs of nutrition-related stressors to keep an eye out for are things like skin issues, allergies, joint pain, acid reflux, heartburn, gas, bloating, headaches, mood swings, blood sugar dysregulation or feeling hangry, PMS symptoms, anything autoimmune related, even mental and emotional health ties in here. If you are experiencing any of these problems, nutrition is key. I have helped clients of mine clear up every single one of the issues that I just mentioned via nutrition and lifestyle. It is wildly powerful. Also, it's worth mentioning that we have gotten to a point where we actually accept issues like this as if they are a normal part of the human experience. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that they are not. They are signs that our bodies give us that something is off. The default state of human beings is of unencumbered health. That might be hard to believe because it is so rare in the Western world nowadays, but it's true. Interestingly enough, there are still hundreds of thousands of humans living extremely closely to how our ancestors lived right now. And we've studied these folks, and many of them actually don't have words in their languages for a bunch of these problems that we see all the time. For example, many of them don't have words for things like insomnia, PMS, joint pain, acid reflux, etc. Simply because these ailments don't exist in their cultures. They've never seen them. How cool is that? But how? These folks aren't eating any processed food at all. They only eat single ingredient whole foods from nature because they quite literally live off of the land. They are hunter-gatherers, herders, pastoralists, etc. Oh, and also in regards to nutrition, if you are thinking that life stress itself causes weight gain outside of nutritional changes, this has been studied, and it turns out that about 50% of people lose weight in the midst of high external life stressors, and about 50% gain weight. And so the obvious take home here is that half of the population eats more in response to external stressors, and the other half eat less, which is great news in the sense that you control what and how much you eat. And therefore, you control your body composition even during high stress times. And we're going to cover exactly how in a minute. Movement. Too little movement is highly stressful to the body, and too much movement is also stressful. For example, there are plenty of folks that don't exercise and get like 2,000 to 5,000 steps per day. That is very stressful to the body because we are built to move so much more than that. The kicker is that our modern lifestyles don't require us to move in order to do things like build shelter, yield food, acquire water, etc. Meaning, movement was literally built into our day for the vast majority of our evolutionary history, whereas now it is not. On the other end of the movement spectrum, we have something like an ultra-marathoner. These folks are moving so much that it's actually highly stressful on their bodies. Running 100 miles is wildly impressive, but it is not a healthful endeavor. And so what I would recommend first and foremost is hitting 10,000 steps per day or 70,000 over the course of the week as a whole at a minimum. Now, if you are currently getting, say, 4,000 steps per day on average, you don't have to necessarily jump straight to 10,000. You can work your way up there. Once you are reliably hitting an average of 10K daily and you'd like to move more, you can add more steps, or you can mix in whatever type of movement modality that you'd like, i.e. strength training, a sport that you enjoy, swimming, Zumba, literally anything. And if you're totally cool to cap your movement at the 10K steps per day mark, that's cool too. In terms of sleep, not getting enough is obviously super stressful, and everyone has experienced sleep debt at some point in their lives. And so in order to keep sleep-related stressors at bay, we want to wake up every day feeling rested and alert. And somewhere between 7 and 9 hours nightly is almost certainly going to be that sweet spot for you. Also, this tidbit is cool. Let's say that right now you feel like you need 10 hours of sleep in order to feel rested and alert, but your nutrition and movement practice has a fair bit of room for improvement. Fortunately, if you dial in your diet and step counts, you will find that you are going to need less sleep in order to feel equally as rested. For example, if you need 10 hours right now with a poor diet in combination with a sedentary lifestyle, you may only need 7 or 8 hours if you dial in those other two pillars. A lot of my clients have experienced this, and I personally have too. I actually used to feel like I couldn't sleep enough. I was always tired, and it made perfect sense because my nutrition, movement, and substances, which we'll talk about in a second, were stressing me out like crazy. And so my body simply couldn't keep up with the repair process that, fun fact, to a large degree happens while we sleep. My poor lifestyle choices were so stressful that I used to sleep for 10 plus hours and still feel terrible. And now, when I'm on track, I can sleep for 7 to 8 hours and feel amazing because I am not inflicting all of that stress on myself anymore. Point being, if you want to get the most out of your time and your sleep specifically while feeling as good as you possibly can, eat super well, hit your step counts, and minimize substances, which leads us perfectly into the next category, This is going to be shocking, but it turns out that alcohol and other drugs really stress the body out. And so the less that you can consume, the better. However, having a bevy some evenings and or a few on the weekends probably isn't going to impact you too much if the other pillars are dialed in. However, everything still does have a cost associated with it. Also, the unfortunate connection here is that substances, specifically weed and alcohol, tend to go hand in hand with poor food decisions. They also impact sleep negatively. And so this circles back to my point around all of these aspects bleeding into one another. And that is because our bodies, and essentially us, function as one cohesive unit. And so if you change one thing, it's like dominoes in the sense that it impacts 50 other things downstream for the better or for the worse. So, when it comes to stress and substances, the less that you can consume, the better. I know for myself, if I'm hungover, I know that logically, I literally have nothing to be anxious or feel depressed about. And yet, I just can't seem to turn those two dials down. Reason being, too much alcohol is quite literally a depressant. And so if you are struggling with feelings of angst and or depression, eliminating or at least reducing your substance intake is a game changer. Now you might be thinking, well, Marcus, I drink because I'm stressed. And this is one of those situations where we really hang ourselves out to dry. Because sure, alcohol may act as a temporary band-aid in terms of relaxing you for an hour or two. But like we just mentioned, everything has a cost. And so when you sober up, not only are those stressors still there, you're now less equipped to handle them. And then you might feel the same way the following day, and then drink again, kicking the can further down the road, and on goes the cycle. The same thing happens with food. All of a sudden, you don't know how to handle stress without alcohol and funky food, and little do you know that you're actually stressing yourself out even more. And so your quote unquote stress management strategy of drinking wine or eating a bunch of chocolate is actually just causing the stress to begin with. I'm speaking from personal experience here. It took me until my early 30s to really figure this out. Okay, now we're at the life section, and this is the trickiest one, just because it's largely uncontrollable. Not entirely, but largely. Things in this section relate to other people and the world as a whole. For example, your kid gets suspended from high school. I got suspended for smoking weed and going to class. That was highly stressful for my parents. A family member falls ill. That is stressful stuff. And there's really nothing that you personally can do to change that. Your car suddenly breaks down. An investment goes sideways. There are a bunch of things that can't be controlled for in the same way as your nutrition, movement, and sleep patterns. And so the key takeaway in regards to this type of external life stress is actually doubling down on the other areas. Reason being is, you can't control the world and you can't control the people around you. And also, you are going to be so much more resilient to whatever uncontrollable stressors come up when you are less stressed in the other areas. That only makes sense, right? The kicker is that when an uncontrollable life stressor pops up, folks often tend to neglect their diet, increase their alcohol consumption, move less, and sleep less. This then stresses them out 100 times more because they are not just psychologically stressed now, they are incredibly physiologically stressed too. Now, this is obviously much easier said than done because when uncontrollable life stressors pop up, folks almost always resort to their default habits and routines. And so, if you haven't built healthy habits yet, this is going to be harder. But if you have, if you've been saving for a rainy day, as they say, this is going to be far easier. So now let's dig into some ways that you can set yourself up for success when an uncontrollable external stressor comes up. And fortunately, these things are going to apply when life is smooth sailing as well. 1. Control your food environment. Let's say that something stressful happens at work, a project goes very poorly, and you are genuinely concerned. You get home that night and you're chilling on the couch after dinner at 7 p.m., and there are 3 bags of your favorite chips in the cupboard 10 steps away. It is going to require a ton of willpower and essentially an internal battle with yourself not to eat those chips. On the other hand, if you have to put on your shoes, get in your car, go to the store, find the chips, pay, get back in your car, drive home, and then you're able to chow down, 99% of the time you're just not going to be willing to go through that much effort in order to get the chips. And so modifying your food environment just makes life so much easier, and it makes you so much healthier. Make the behaviors that you want to engage in very convenient, and simultaneously make the behaviors that you don't want to engage in very inconvenient, i.e., keep tons of healthy food around and don't keep tons of unhealthy food around. It is wildly simple and incredibly effective. We are essentially using our own laziness to our advantage here. If you're relying on willpower all the time at home, you've essentially already lost in a way. Now, it's worth mentioning that you may live with your partner or family, and they may eat differently from you. And so, what I would recommend in a situation like this is getting rid of the things that you find the most tempting. For example, I don't keep ice cream around because I absolutely love it, and it is not a matter of if I will eat it, it is when. However, if you stock my cupboards with 30 boxes of muffins, I wouldn't even be tempted to take a single bite. Muffins just aren't my jam. And so get clear on the foods that you find the most tempting, ditch those, and then your family members can keep what you don't feel tempted to indulge in around with no issues. The exact same concept applies to alcohol. If you want to drink less, make it easy to drink less, and make it hard to drink more. So if you love red wine and you want to drink less of it, maybe don't keep 3 cases in your cupboard at all times, and instead, have someone you go out to a restaurant or bar with friends and make your home a red wine-free zone. I remember when I used to drink a lot, I would keep beers in my fridge all the time. I'd drink them and then actually feel sorry for myself when I felt anxious and depressed after boozing. It made no sense. I was literally creating feelings of angst and depression with every single sip that I took. And then I would say, why me? And act like it was something that was out of my control. That is straight up insane behavior. Another key to setting yourself up for success during stressful times is meal prep. And a simple way to think about this is, would you do your laundry one piece at a time? Of course not, right? You wear a bunch of your clothes, and then once you have enough to wash a full load, you do that. Same dealio with food prep. Make a bunch of meals so that, again, engaging in the behavior that you want to engage in, healthful eating, is significantly easier. There is so much less temptation to eat out if you literally have prepped meals ready to roll. If you're someone that likes 100% fresh food 3 times a day, feel free to cook 1 meal at a time. However, this obviously requires a lot more time, and there is a lot more room for error. Accountability is another amazing way to set yourself up for success, and that could be a fitness buddy, a spouse or partner, a coaching group, one-on-one coaching, any sort of system that's external to you. Because if you could achieve your goal on your own, you almost certainly would have done it already. We all require help and support, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Maintaining your movement practice. Fortunately, walking is the most accessible form of movement, period. You can literally do it inside your home. I would recommend getting outside. However, Indoors is better than not doing it at all by a long shot. You can also go for walks or pace around while you're on the phone catching up with people, while you're on social media, when you're meeting with friends to socialize, as a family activity, spending quality time together, listening to this podcast, waiting for your kids while they're at soccer practice. Where there's a will, there's a way really applies to stuff like this. There are walking opportunities everywhere. It's just about noticing and then capitalizing on them. Also, not to mention, walking in and of itself is just one of the best stress relieving activities, plain and simple. And so if you are stressed out and you don't think that you have time to get your steps in, you may not have time not to get your steps in. Now, if you're someone who finds that working out and lifting weights reduces your stress levels, by all means, do it. If you find that a boxing class helps you release pent-up energy, get it. If yoga really zens you out, hit it up. Whatever works. In terms of sleep, if you're finding that you're having trouble sleeping because of some external life stressor, I think that journaling is a super underrated tool. It is just you and a piece of paper. You can write whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, and you can even burn the piece of paper afterwards if you're worried about someone reading it. You can give yourself full permission to feel how you ought to feel in your journal without judgment, and that is amazing. Also, just communicating and expressing whatever you need to express with friends, family, partners, etc. is also super helpful. Sometimes we just need to get it out. It's like going to the bathroom mentally and emotionally. Meditation and breath work can be useful tools as well, and something else to consider in terms of stress on a more spiritual level, I guess you could say, is that life never gives you more than you can handle. I truly believe that, and the saying that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger is super accurate. If you think back to one of the most stressful times in your life, I'm sure that you've grown and become a more resilient version of yourself from that experience. It's interesting because cancer survivors will often say that cancer was actually one of the best things that ever happened to them. Now, it's so difficult to view hardships like this that way in the midst of it. However, hindsight is 20/20, right? And the truth is that life has worked out every single time. If you are alive, it's worked out. Some of the hardest times in my life have turned out to be absolute blessings, big picture. I would not change a thing. I personally don't believe in regret or putting a bunch of energy towards thinking about changing the past. I prefer to reflect and direct those resources towards how I can improve moving forward, simply because it works. It's effective. Whereas the woulda, shoulda, coulda game is tempting, but straight up pointless. Point being, focus on the controllables and do your absolute best to surrender to the uncontrollables. This is stress management in a nutshell, meaning set yourself up for success via great nutrition, plenty of movement, quality sleep, and reducing your substance intake. And if you do that, you are going to be the most resilient version of yourself as you can possibly be. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. If you're finding this info helpful and you'd like to, feel free to leave the pod a review on your favorite podcast platform. And you can follow me on Instagram at N1Fitness, on TikTok at the N1Fitness, and on YouTube at marcusadu/N1Fitness. If you'd like to stay up to date on the newest episode releases, you can hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that you found this stress episode useful, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya.